How are you already working semiotically without knowing how? In this third omnibus, we will explore the hows and the whys of this. We begin with the shared creative process of ideation. The beginning of any visual communication project is where ideas for answering the brief begin, where insights from researching provoke ideas and sketching takes place. Whatever way you sketch ideas, you are already working semiotically. Discuss. Welcome to the third Semiosis 101 Omnibus edition from Season 3. If you have watched the weekly Semiosis 101 episodes before, then you already know I am Dave Wood and I explain Charles Sanders Peirce's semiotic theory of semiosis sign action in design-centric terms. In this omnibus, I collect 3 REDUX episodes of Semiosis 101's Season 3 into a single edition. These episodes can be watched back to back in this edition on the subject of semiotically strengthening your ideation. Season 3's overall semiotic theme is semiotic encoding, with a focus on how audiences make interpretations. What this season's theme means to you as visual communicators is that at long last you will see what semiotic science can be, are, will be. For any new viewers joining Semiosis 101, welcome. We will build your confidence to encode semiotic sign action into your own designs or illustrations during your own ideation phase to enhance visual communication. Why do you need Semiosis 101? Peirce's writing and terminology is very obtuse. On Semiosis 101, I translate Peirce's brilliant theory into language creatives will understand and can follow. After all, we study design and illustration and not philosophy, so we need theory centered to creators' needs. Yes, that is why you need Semiosis 101. So subscribe and let us jump straight into semiotic sketching, semiotically strengthening your ideation. Ideation. I use this term a lot, but you may call this first phase at the beginning of any creative work something else. Let's agree we are talking about the same thing, the creation of possible ideas that may solve the creative problem set by the client. Whether this is a design problem of brand X or an illustration problem of create a set of 10 illustrations for this book. It all begins with possibilities rather than definitive final outcomes. Those possibilities come from research-led insights that kickstart the creative process. But let us consider if those possibilities can be enhanced. All creators working commercially have a target audience. This may be defined by the client, or it may mean some research on the creator's part. In semiotic encoding, the audience is key. In Season 2, we spent a lot of episodes. We focused on creatives engaging a lot of time in abduction. No, not kidnapping. Abductive reasoning, the logic of design. This is about forming a logical hypothesis of who your target audiences are. This reasoning, based on research, reveals insights on the target audience's lived experiences. In turn, this provides creatives clues to what familiar qualities and resemblances to known things the audience will perceive, which creatives can then semiotically hack. Peirce says nothing is a semiotic sign until it is first interpreted as a sign. Without knowing what a panda is, an audience would never arrive at an interpretation of a drawing of a panda as a panda. What comes first, the semiotic sign or the image? Let us not think in binary terms. If 3 people look at a pattern of black splodges and perceive 3 different interpretations, the black splodges remain what they are. Perception of the visual element may see the marks either as just random marks or they are meaning bearing. Humans are hardwired to interpret visual elements for signs of meaning. In our distant hunter-gatherer past, it was the daily survival balance between eating something or being eaten by something. As creatives, every mark you make has the potential by the target audience to be interpreted as meaning bearing, whether you encode meaning into a splodge or not. So, Semiosis offers you the semiotic framework to actively visually encode meaning where you intend it. Okay, back to our 3 people looking at black splodges. What could these black splodges mean, if anything? To one person, they just see black splodges and nothing else. They do not perceive anything. To this person, they are not meaning bearing. To the second person, they perceive the same black splodges form a pattern that suggests to them something. In their lived experience, they are familiar with the shape of an animal. The black splodges offer them the possibility that the pattern they form is not random. The alignment resembles, in their perception, the qualities of legs, a body, a head, etc. This person interprets the same black splodges as meaning bearing. The final person perceives exactly the same as the second person, but in their lived experience, they can go much further in their interpretation than the second person. They go from a possibility to name the thing they see as a panda. These are the same black splodges, but perceived in 3 different ways, with 2 different interpretations, with only one person seeing the panda. It is the panda we wanted them to interpret. Let us flip this example from perception to semiotic encoding of the visual elements. In the drawing of the panda, the creative has used certain marks to form the shape of what we know as a panda. The distinctive black and white markings are crafted in such a way, utilising the gestalt of figure and ground to emphasise a panda. Semiotically speaking, each mark used is individually meaning bearing. Each mark is an encoded semiotic sign. Think of each mark as a micro visual communication building block, which is semiotically functioning at the lowest level of a conic representation. Yes, I know mark also has a meaning in branding. What do we do when we sketch? We make rough drawings and tentative drafts of what we may eventually take to completion. These drawings, in whatever media, can represent features of observed scenes or objects, or conjure up things from memory or imagination. Often sketches are preliminary studies of intention used to problem solve composition, point of view, or other forms of problem solving. Sketching can be observational or purely propositional. Sketching is still in its rough state of aesthetic finish, visual communication. Sketches, however, typically use quick marks and simple lines to capture only the essential elements of the subject matter. A sketch will usually lack many of the details that a finished drawing would have. The fundamental elements will get worked out in a sketch, such as composition, proportion, scale, and the balance between values. Ideation involves sketching. Ideation in a creative process, whether by a graphic designer or illustrator, follows 3 stages. These are idea generation, idea selection, and idea development. The client in their brief provides you with a creative visual communication problem to solve. Research provides you with insights from contextual knowledge gleaned from a variety of sources. Ideation is the process you have all been doing since day 1 of design school, whether you call it that or not. You generate ideas by sketching these possibilities. You visually communicate possible creative solutions to others and yourself with the minimum of visual marks. How does someone else see your possible solution from a few roughly sketched marks? They interpret what they see from their lived experiences. But how clear have you been in sketching the idea? If the person, a fellow creative, a client, does not successfully interpret what you hope they will, then as the creative you can then simply adjust the sketch to visually communicate your intended meaning with more clarity. At each stage of ideation, you adjust your sketches toward the development of a successful visual communication solution to the brief. At each stage of ideation, from generation, selection and development of ideas, you are crafting the visual language from your sketches to become meaning bearing. At each stage of ideation, you move from possibilities to propositions to finally visual communication of intended meanings through your aesthetic decisions. Whether you realize it or not, you have always been semiotically encoding levels of meaning into your chosen visual language. Pair's semiosis now helps you to finesse how well you do this. With Semiosis 101, I am lifting the veil of semiotic theory to show the alignments to what creatives already do. In translating arcane semiotic terminology into your existing creative process, Semiosis 101 brings Persian semioticians and creatives closer into a mutually beneficial communicational situation. Let me summarize how ideation is essentially semiotic. Brief, research, idea generation, idea selection, idea development, outcome. That is a creative process. It is not linear, as each step in itself is fluid. Next week we will explore this semiotic topic with the design double diamond. The brief sets the communicational problem to solve. Research provides the creative with contextual knowledge to provide understanding and insights into both the brief's topic and the target audience. These insights provide initial ideas. The creative then can begin sketching possible visual ways to convey these ideas to the audience. But at this sketching stage, all they have to do this are lines, marks, shapes, colours, etc. These basic visual communication building blocks of potential meaning will remain lines, marks, shapes, colours, etc. until someone else interprets what they see as possibilities of familiar qualities and visual resemblance to things they know. But surely they are just lines, marks, shapes, colours, etc. As soon as the individual elements are interpreted as meaning something more, Gestalt, the basic building block begins to work semiotically. Just imagine if, as a creative, you could be more effective in doing this. Come back next week when we will go deeper into the ideation process to apply semiosis. In the context of visual communication, will it take too long to bother encoding semiotic science? After all, none of those terms mean anything to creatives. The answer to the question is no, as it is just now mindfully tweaking what creatives already do during ideation and sketching. But creatives have a point with the terminology. The terms are obtuse. Semioticians, you know what is coming, off-putting to creative people. Over 2 seasons of Semiosis 101, we have covered iconic and lexical and symbolic representation. Each new Semiosis 101 episode brings in new viewers, so these terms will always be obtuse. Now, in Season 3, I am dropping 3 further terms into play: ream, dissent and argument, and qualisign, synsign and legisign. Whatever are we to do about explaining these terms? Do not press stop. Do not panic. We will now contextualize these semiotic terms into your creative practice. Just like during your ideation, there are things that are unknown and then known and provide you with insights to successfully answer a brief. These terms are just like that, nothing more. The ideas behind Peirce's obtuse terminology are what will be insightful. Trust me. So, to first recap on what viewers of Semiosis 101 already know from 2 seasons of episodes. Iconic, indexical and symbolic representation are the 3 levels of how a concept, meaning, can be semiotically represented. Ream, dissent and arguments are the levels of how interpretation is made from the semiotic representation. Qualisign, synsign and legisign are the levels that the form the semiotic sign takes to communicate. I'm still sensing incredulity out there. Let me put this in designer-centric terms. When you sketch a possible idea, what are you doing? You are trying to visually represent an idea you just thought of. As I say to my students who are reticent at ideation and want to rush to the Mac and Adobe to do design with their first idea. First, show me. Let us summarise. A creative gets an idea to answer the brief. That idea is floating around the synapses of their brain. The idea is genius, but how to visualise it? The creative makes a mark, a line, a shape, a colour. This begins to crudely resemble the qualities in the idea. This is sketched quickly on paper and is shown to another person. Remember, the creative has total belief their idea, now on paper, is genius. Surely everyone will see from a few lines their genius. The second person looks at the crude line scrawled on the paper representing the idea that the creative believes to be genius and says, I don't get it. Is the idea not genius? At this stage, it's too early to say. Is the sketching poor? It is a sketch, so maybe, or maybe not. Is the second person an idiot? Absolutely not. So where does the communicational problem lie? Let me quickly append some of Peirce's lowest level terms to this scenario before we move on to resolving this. The creative makes a mark, a line, a shape, a colour. Iconic representation. This begins to crudely resemble the qualities in the idea. Grammatic. This is sketched quickly on paper and is shown to another person. Qualisign. Let us unpack this. The crude sketch is comprised of individual marks, lines, shapes, colours, etc. Once these are perceived as something meaning-bearing, they begin to work semiotically. Sign action has been triggered by the act of perception of someone else. As the creative, you know those marks do bear meaning, otherwise you would not have bothered. You have used iconic representation to try to encode meaning in a few crude lines. These lines suggest familiarity to qualities and resemblances of what defines the idea in your head. The second person cannot open your head and look into what you are thinking, so is reliant on the sketch and its iconic representation to try to understand. They see the sketched lines, these crude patterns suggest a probable interpretation based on their own lived experiences, not the lived experience of the creative. The second person sees the sketch, tries to interpret something from it based on the possibility of something they may have encountered before, romantic. They, in this scenario, then say, I do not get it. They see the line suggest some basic meaning, iconic. They have tried to find that basic meaning, romantic, but how it has been presented is a sticking point in a successful interpretation. A qualisign, synsign, and legislign are the levels of visual agency to ensure the meaning-bearing elements are perceived and successfully interpreted. Admit it, you thought I was going to say that the paper was the qualisign. A qualisign is Peirce's term to describe the lowest level of visual agency that is nothing more than visual qualities. What I've just described above is Peirce's lowest classification that a semiotic sign can take. An idea that is sketched with basic levels of meaning that are only represented as possible visual qualities to something that someone may find familiar. This is sign 1 in Peirce's 10 sign classifications. More on these next month. A first sketch to show what you mean is obviously something that is a first draft. It needs further refinement. This is how semiosis at the lowest level of visual representation begins to work. You have all done this scenario and heard, I do not get it. You do not give up. You refine, you resketch, and you improve your visual communication. Every time you resketch or select something else to communicate what you mean, you are crafting your iconic representation to enhance how someone else will understand, romantic, what you are trying to visually communicate. As you refine your ideas and people begin to understand that this is that indexical representation, up to this now means that symbolic representation, their interpretations move from a possible meaning, romantic, to a proposed meaning, Dyson, to an actual meaning, argument. As the semiotic representation of the concept to be visually communicated becomes more assured and that its interpretation becomes more confident, the agency of how this is achieved, qualisign, synsign, legislign, is also semiotically strengthened. Semiosis is a process. Encoding semiotic signs with meaning bearing is not a manufacturing process. The audience's understanding is conditional. So, semiotic sign action, semiosis, is a framework to improve the effectiveness for successful visual communication. Applying semiosis maps to the creator's existing ideation practice. You are already doing it, in parts, blindly, and not very well, as it is new to you. Boom! A mic drop moment. Was Peirce thinking of creators when he came up with his sign action theory? Absolutely not. That would be absurd. Remember, he was a philosopher, a founder of pragmatism, a theorist, a mathematician, and a great thinker, but his language is obtuse. Today's episode has taken me personally years to think about what he meant and how it can map to creative ideation. To explain it in designer-centric context, I have had to consider how true am I being to his theory compared to how can his thinking enhance visual communication practice? How did I even begin to go from obtuse theory into practical application? We all owe a debt of gratitude to two information scientists who, in a 2009 academic paper, analysed graffiti through a Peircean lens. As we end this episode on semiotic ideation, I have put Peirce's obtuse language into the context of sketching out the first idea during ideation. This is not only an example of how to understand the theory, but also serves as a simile to how semiosis is a flowing process of meaning making and not a manufacturing process of making signage. Just as your first idea is not your solution to a client's briefing problem, sorry students, get ideating more. Applying semiosis flows through all you create. Semiosis goes further. Just as your creative outcomes go out into the world beyond your creative control, so does how your audience reacts to your work. In next week's episode, we will pull all these flowing strings together. Do not panic if you do not get it yet. In the last episode, I left you all with the revelation that you have already been encoding semiotic science. Does this mean Semiosis 101 has made itself redundant? Obviously not. The reality, as you are all aware from my statements, is that without perceiving it, every aesthetic decision you make has the potential to be meaning bearing. Yes, every line, mark, shape, colour you manipulate has the potential for meaning bearing. But what meaning? Visual miscommunication can be made. Your audience can perceive alternate meanings from your visual communication outputs. Or, worst case scenario, the audience just does not perceive at all what you are trying to visually communicate. Semiosis, as a pragmatic semiotic theory, just provides creatives with a framework to strengthen the visual communication of your intended visual messages. This all begins with sketching ideas. 2 episodes back, I described the ideation process. Whatever you call the ideas development stage, that is the stage I am referring to. Brief, research, idea generation, idea selection, idea development, outcome. This is the broad brush description of a design process if we focus in on just the stages of ideation. Ideation is concerned with the generation of ideas to solve the brief's problem from insights your research has gleaned. Great, ideation is all about getting ideas. I get it. No, ideation is more than getting ideas. Which ideas will be best to drop and which ideas should be developed? That is a focus of the creative after generating ideas. Okay, check. Get ideas, drop some, take some forward. Can I get to the computer now and get on with the creative bit? I do enjoy adopting an impatient student character on these Semiosis 101 episodes. Which ideas should be dropped, which ideas have potential, and which ideas can be combined to make better solutions is a qualitative decision. I'm not going to tell you how to do your job. After all, this is Semiosis 101 and my agenda is encoding semiotics to enhance visual communication. Instead, I'm going to point out the obvious. Visually sketching ideas and then selecting the best ideas to take forward is predicated on an important point. Is that how good I can make it look using Photoshop? I think you know where I am coming from. At this ideation stage, it is not about finished aesthetic qualities, but meaning-bearing qualities. It is these that have the potential to visually communicate the ask of the brief. Which idea or ideas help visually communicate what you need to visually communicate? Who says? You? Well, I like this one. I can do that really well in Adobe Illustrator. You can tell as a lecturer, I have heard it all. As I write this episode, the new teaching year is 1 week away. Remember, we do not design or illustrate for ourselves first. We need to center the primary target audience in our creative process. So, to decide which ideas have potential, it is the audience who will decide. You encode meaning, the audience has to decode meaning. Get that process wrong, and you will miscommunicate. Get it right? Well, Semiosis can help you finesse this important stage to enhance visual communication. Remember, the final ideation stage is development. If you want to know more about your target audience, then check out most of Season 2's episodes. The encoding of semiotic sign action, aka semiosis, begins for the creative at the basic level. Peirce calls this iconic representation. This is a qualitative point where creators play with visualizing their ideas through rough sketches. With each sketched idea, the creative is trying ways to convey ideas through familiar qualities to things already known to the audience. These visual qualities, using iconic lines, marks, shapes, colours, etc., form very basic images of things that resemble more complex things. Now you realise this semiosis has a toehold into your existing creative process to gain semiotic momentum. Let us quickly put semiosis and ideation into a design process from start to finish. We will use the Design Council's double diamond diagram. The Design Council's double diamond design process diagram is a great way to frame what any creative does when they work on any commercial job. Whether you are a designer or an illustrator, your individual creative process maps to this double diamond. Let us look at the diamonds as more than a linear process. If it was linear, it would be a straight line. From the starting point on the left hand side of the first diamond, the creative begins a period of researching and initial ideas. This is a divergent phase as the creator's researching and lateral thinking explodes in all directions. During this phase, the creator can also get valuable insights into their target audience's needs and shared lived experiences. These insights will help the iconic representation with likely familiar qualities to resemble known things. In the second half of the first diamond, the creative process enters the second selective phase of ideation. At some point in both research and idea generation, you have to begin to converge. Which ideas would help visually communicate the client's brief concept to the target audience? At this stage, what visual iconic qualities will help hook the target audience's attention? By seeking the answer to this through analysing and selecting the best ideas, the creative can also move forward to finessing their chosen visual language. When we use such a term, it refers to the visual qualities the creative employs to visually communicate. As we can see, as soon as a creative begins to finesse their rough sketched ideas, they are simply finessing the iconic building blocks of visual communication. As a creative begins to develop their suitable ideas toward the final output, whether a design, publication or a set of illustrations, they enter the second diamond. Once more, from a creative position of a suitable idea to develop to publication, the creative enters a second period of divergence. This is where they try all the tricks in their toolbox to ensure the output will answer the brief. But will it successfully communicate its intended message to the target audience? At this final finessing phase begins, the creative revisits their creative decisions to ensure they are not miscommunicating. This final stage not only focuses on professional finishing services, but also on tweaking the encoded semiotic sign action. This ensures a successful interpretation of what is meant to be communicated. In each double diamond step, each creative will have their own process on how to diverge, converge. It is fluid, messy, and certainly not a clean, linear step-by-step procedure. When my young undergraduates begin to develop their own creative practice, they sometimes find it hard to break free from their software comfort zones into lateral thinking and problem solving. Semiosis offers the creative a qualitative process of improving any visual meaning-bearing elements. Does the few brushstrokes in an illustration visually communicate a tree, or does it look like something else? Does the composition of several graphic elements in a page layout support the tone of voice and theme, or does the nexus space between the elements now look like a Nazi swastika? The structure that a strong ideation process within a larger creative process of diverge, converge, offers designers and illustrators a scalable, repeatable, professional work plan. By embedding the framework of semiosis into your creative process, it provides you with applicable ways to successfully encode connotative meaning into your outcomes. By applying semiosis, you can use the encoded semiotic sign action it affords you to improve the success of the visual communication. Semiosis will help you to help your target audience to successfully interpret what is intended and reduce the miscommunication. Come back next week when we will begin 4 episodes to dig deeper into how your target audience interprets. We are currently halfway through season 3 and we have a lot more to explore. So remember to subscribe, See you all again for the next Semiosis 101 episode. Semiosis 101 is unique in helping illustrators and designers to semiotically enhance your visual communication skills. One designer-centric semiotic video at a time. Remember to hit subscribe to be notified when the next episode hits.